Hello to everybody. I have the honor to chair this part of this event. I need to, of course, to thank Martin Oisig for this incredible event because I do believe this is extremely important. Pollinators are, in my opinion, the top priority in the world, not only in Europe, for saving the biodiversity. Luckily, most of the citizens, when you talk about biodiversity, they think about animals and especially mammals. But in reality, biodiversity is a much more complex system. And we do not have to forget about vegetables. And from this point of view, pollinators are extremely important, if not the most important. This part of the event is extremely important, and especially I'm extremely happy about the presence of young people so that they can transmit this culture of saving the pollinators to all the other European citizens. So this is extremely important. I will conclude saying that the pollinators, in my opinion, have a double value because on one side, they are an extremely important indicator of the status, health status of the environment. So it is extremely important to actually monitor and understand what are the trends regarding pollinators. And on the other side, they are an extremely powerful engine for saving biodiversity and for doing the right things for the environment. So from this point of view, and I will stop here, but we do have some extremely talented speakers. I will quote only a few of them, but Elena Abassi from the UNAPI, so the Association of the Apiculture in Italy, but Jean-Sébastien Rossoupillot from Notagoa, and Nadine Schuller from the Pollinator Ambassador, Hugh Collins for the butterfly, because pollinators are not only bees, of course, and Venezia Galanaki, which is extremely young, but extremely powerful and active in the defense of the pollinators, and Yuri Matheman of the Naturalistic Biodiversity Center. So having said that, I will leave the space to our speakers. Thank you very much for your attendance.
So the first speaker is Nadine Schuller. Could you, Nadine, please? She's from the Nadine Schuller. Thank you very much for appearing. Nadine Schuller is a young and dynamic bee expert, and she is today with us for the representing the European bee ambassadors. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to start the screen sharing right now. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, okay. Perfect. It works.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So thank you for having me. And I'm very honored to be here and to speak on behalf of citizen engagement for pollinators. For starting off, just a few words of who Pollinator Ambassadors is, or what Pollinator Ambassadors is. We are an international startup with a base in Austria, co-founded by me and Nienke Blömer from the Netherlands. And just to give an understanding of where the name comes from, Nienke and I are both beekeepers. And we have seen in the last couple of years that there is an increased awareness for diverse Save the Bees campaign, but the first pollinator people think about are then the honeybee. However, it's the wild pollinators, as we have heard this week already, that are really in need for our attention. So imagine if every beekeeper out there was an ambassador, not only for the honeybee, but also for wild pollinators. That is our goal. And that is why we teach workshops and also speak on behalf of pollinators in different events. And I would like to also start to present the STING project, which is a current project we're involved in. And also Venetia Galanaki is going to talk about it, I think. It is the Science and Technology for Pollinating Insects initiative from the Pollinator Initiative of the European Union, and also the DG, which is part of the DG Environment, and also the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And the goal is to promote collaboration on pollinator, to stop pollinator decline, and also raise awareness and engage society at large. So we are currently conducting research for the STING project. And apart from also providing citizens with tools to become pollinator ambassadors themselves, our research questions are: what are the motivations, concerns, and obstacles of local youth initiatives and beekeepers? Also, which intergenerational differences are out there within the beekeeping community? And also, how can citizens and beekeepers be mobilized as pollinator ambassadors? We are approaching these research questions through several activities, and these are workshops, both on-site workshops and online workshops, and the on-site workshops have already been completed. In total, we gave 10 workshops among 4 different member states, which were Austria, Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia. And so in each member state, we gave at least one workshop for beekeepers and one for youth. And these were embedded in a social media campaign, which we called Bike for Bees. And that campaign served to also promote what we learned from the people in social media and to connect these people better. And we really hope to be able to continue such a project and maybe repeat it next year. Just to give an overview of what is the content of these workshops. First, yes, there is also the online workshop. So we're going to give an online workshop next weekend, where we are targeting at least 24 beekeepers from at least 5 different EU member states. However, we have already received almost 60 applications from the EU and beyond, which shows that such trainings for beekeepers to take also care of wild pollinators is really important. And so now about the content of these workshops. First, we always start off with some introduction to pollinators and raise awareness for their importance, as we have heard in the starting statement, and to bring everybody on the same knowledge level. And then we use systems thinking, which is a tool to understand the problem and its roots vary from the deepest roots, and identify possible solutions along with some impact assessment. And there are many different tools within systems thinking. One of them is, as you can see on the right side, the iceberg model, which allows for really going through all of the different aspects that pollinator decline affect. And we know that it's quite a complex problem, so that allows it to understand really deeply. And then we also gave an overview of EU policies and funding opportunities, which was particularly welcomed by youth. And then we found some solutions together, which was fitting the particular settings of each organization we have visited. And for that, we used a theory of change approach, which really allows to teach some project planning and to conduct some action planning for each initiative visited. We do have some preliminary results, of course, already, even though the online workshop still will be conducted. First of all, it's really positive that there is great motivation out there to learn. And especially youth are so keen on learning about pollinators. And there is already a great awareness for different causes of pollinator decline. Particularly intensive agriculture has been mentioned, along with pesticides, fertilizers, urbanization, and the monoculture. However, it was very interesting to hear that most of the participants connected the reasons for pollinator decline to a more deeper and cultural problem, which is a lack of education and the growing disconnection from nature. Also, we found out that there is a great potential to turn youth and beekeepers into ambassadors for pollinators. However, there needs to be access to resources. The new Erasmus Plus and ESC, so European Solidarity Corps schemes, could really solve that problem and have great potential, especially because it's a bigger fund right now. However, especially youth are still having problems to write such applications because of the complexity, or to find a scheme that would suit their needs. And also regarding beekeepers stated that the available funding goes to the beekeeping associations, which is great, but they expressed that they would like some of that funding to go to actions for wild pollinators, either directly or within the associations. And also we found out about beekeepers that beekeeping and wild pollinators are not viewed as antagonistic. That means beekeepers noted that honeybees and wild bees face the same problems, and that honeybees and wild pollinators are, so to say, victims of the industrial agriculture, and they focused on industrial agriculture as the bigger problem that their honeybees have in common with wild pollinators. That was very interesting for us to find out. Also, the conclusion would be that we are going to explore these preliminary findings further in the online training, but we see great potential and need for follow-up training opportunities for beekeepers and youth, especially in terms of project management skills, such as entrepreneurial basics, project planning, so they can turn their pollinator passion into a more long-term and potentially sustainable, also financially sustainable project too. And also we need trainings on funding applications so that it is easier for young people to access the resources they need to be active for pollinators. To finish, I have good news and I have bad news. Let's start with the bad news. It's that everything is related to biodiversity and pollinators, and they're in decline. The good news is everything is related to biodiversity and pollinators. So that means there's a lot of starting points out there and everybody can be active because so much of what we do is related to them. So let's not give up, and thank you for listening. I will stop the screen sharing now.
Thank you, Nadine. Very interesting presentation. I have to say that I'm very happy that such a young person is working so hard on the cause of pollinators in Europe, and this really makes me feel positive about the objective that we can reach. Now we go to another very young person that is working very hard on this topic, Venezia Galanaki from Greece. And with a presentation on the building a hive, scaling up youth engagement in the protection of wild pollinators. So I'll leave the floor to Venezia.
Hi everyone, let me just share my screen and I'll be right back. Oops, 1 second. Okay, that should work now. If there's any problems, just let me know. So it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. And it's great to have not just one young person, but two in a panel like this. So I think that's a great start for youth involvement in pollinators conservation. So I'm here representing Youth and Environment Europe. And within Youth and Environment Europe, I do all our work related to pollinators. So first of all, I want to start with a very simple question, since we're discussing citizen engagement here, is why is it important to engage youth? So first of all, I just want to say that youth, it's important to consider the different nuances in citizens' identity. So age is one of them. It could be gender, it could be ethnicity, nationality, anything, but we're considering youth because in this way we can make sure that we make appropriate and relevant engagement activities for each of these groups of people. So for youth, it's important to make an effort to engage, as we're very often left out of a lot of important conversations for things that really matter to us. And this is not just a shame for not us being included, but by not including such a huge group of people, there is a huge reserve of ideas and ways of thinking that remains untapped. So we're all missing out by not including different groups. So this is definitely something that we need to consider. And youth is often dismissed as being maybe too naive or inexperienced or idealistic. And this could be true, but I think given the state that we're in now, this might be something that could really help us push forward. And finally, it's really important to engage youth, because a lot of the decisions being taken today is something that is going to affect us in the future. So it only makes good sense that we're in it when those decisions are made. So this is more generally about youth engagement. And I just want to mention what we do at Youth and Environment Europe very briefly to remedy the lack of youth engagement. So first of all, we're an organization, we're based in Czechia, we're one of the oldest youth organizations established in the 80s. And we work on increasing collaboration between youth groups, because it's really important to see what different groups are doing around Europe and beyond, to act in solidarity with issues that are specific in different areas, and to generally be connected, exchange, work on projects together, and become more unified so we're more powerful. And then we work on capacity building, because it has been identified that this is one of the issues that youth faces when it comes to involvement. So it's a lot about that we don't have the experience, we don't have the know-how, we just don't know how we can be more informed and more engaged. So this is something that we really try to work on, and this is what the project I was involved in terms of Pollinators is about. And then finally, on advocacy. So we work on making space for youth to be in decision-making spaces, whatever that is. So we do advocacy efforts that bring together our whole entire network of NGOs around Europe and beyond. So this is what we do, and this is why we were chosen to work on capacity building for pollinators. And more specifically, what the project was about. So the project is called Spreading Pollen, which is the one I am leading. And we were tasked to identify potential multipliers for youth engagement for the protection of pollinators. So we weren't just asked to target individuals, as in the case of Nadine's project, but we were asked to try to find out who are really those groups that can help us scale up youth engagement. And this in most cases is not just youth organizations, because often youth groups don't have a formal standing. So it could be informal youth groups, it could even be university societies and local groups that youth form. So there's many different structures that could be those multipliers. And then we were tasked to deliver 2 online courses to motivate, train, and educate them on the topic of the conservation of wild pollinators. And as Nadine, because we were part of the same project, we were meant to report our findings back to our funders, so that they can use those to scale up such projects for the future. So this is the context of our project. And just to dive into what we did. So we did 2 online trainings following 2 different approaches. So we really tried to see how we can do this from different angles, and we wanted to be the trainings to be more action oriented for the youth organization. So they go out of the training and they can actually go on and implement solutions for the conservation of wild pollinators. Because this is really important for youth organizations to see how they can be directly involved in solving the problem. Because we believe just awareness raising is not enough. We need to be part of the solution. So our first training was focused on community engagement. So we really wanted to empower young people to see how they can become change makers in their communities by engaging others. So this is the multiplier effect I was talking about. So this could be anything. It could be awareness raising campaigns, involving citizen science, so literally anything. And in the trainings, we're aiming to provide a space for people to be informed, but also develop how they want to go about after the end of the training. And then our second training, which just finished on Sunday, was meant to be on advocacy. So it was meant to empower young people to better understand regulatory frameworks governing the lives of pollinators and how to actually intervene in those locally. So all of our work is more focused on the local level because we believe that by creating distraction with small pockets of engaged citizens in different places across Europe, this is how we can make a difference. So all of our work is focused locally for this project. And just going a little bit into the topics that we covered with our trainings. So as I said, we wanted the trainings to be very much action-oriented. Our trainings were in the more formal education style, so it wasn't just webinars. We made sure they were as interactive as possible. We had small groups. We made sure that the participants had space to engage between them with us, with guest speakers, so that they can exchange knowledge with more experienced individuals. And we really wanted to focus on our participants having a go at actually designing the actions they want to implement. So what we covered on the first training, we went into pollinators advocacy and drivers of decline, because we found that within youth groups, there is a lot of interest to do something for pollinators, but there isn't always a holistic understanding of their importance and how much of a strategic point for a lot of our environmental work they could be. So we first covered that. Then we covered community engagement techniques. So how to find your target group, how to understand them better, how to reach out to them, different activities that they could do. And then for the end of the training, we provided the space and the tools and the support so that the participants could design their own community engagement actions through working through different exercises that we prepared for them. And then for our second training, we followed a similar format. So I would say these trainings were 3 days, so 3 full long days, and they were all online, so they were quite intensive and intense. And for the advocacy training, we covered again pollinators ecology, drivers of decline. We tried to cover pollinators governance on the different levels, so both European, national, and then we had participants researching local. And then we discussed advocacy strategies. We had guest speakers working in this for a little while. And we, again, provided the space for tools, exercises for participants to develop their own campaigns. Here I provided just some examples. So this is actually from the participants. So this is from different groups, as you can see on top, where it says group 3 and 4. So this is from our first training. So as I said, we didn't want to make this presentation, these trainings like lectures or webinars. We wanted to make sure there's a lot of interaction. So before we presented what people can do, we asked them to tell us what they could do. So this is the suggestions that representatives of youth organizations gave us. So as you can see, it's very varied. And this is what I mean when I talk about the untapped potential of ideas in young people. So this is a great example of all the things that young people are really willing to implement and are interested, and they join trainings for this, and they really want to have a go at trying to make this happen in the real world. So these are some examples from our community engagement training. As you can see, they put different things you can do in your personal space as a consumer, citizen science activities. And then we did the same for our advocacy training. So here I've provided the framework we showed our participants that they can use. I'm seeing that this is a bit blurry here, but basically we give them a framework to work through their ideas, the objectives, the steps they need to take, working through a power matrix. And this is from just one participant. And then we had 25. So just to show you, this is 25 different ideas of campaigns that people had to implement on their local level. So again, this is what I mean about youth having ideas and energy. And this is really something that we need to harness and support. So I know I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm just going to skim through this quickly. So basically the insights that we got from this training is some highlights from it were that we had participants from all over Europe, very diverse backgrounds of education, of activities that we're involved in. And it was really great to hear what all those people wanted to do for pollinators. And then it was great to have the space for exchange, because pollinators is still a very niche area. So it's good to provide those changes just for interactions of interested young people. It was great to see participants' contributions, what I showed you before. And it was great to see the connections between the individuals from the organization. So we even had representatives of citizen science projects that connected with other people, and now they joined that work of theirs. We had a participant from a Greek organization that was actually looking to find ambassadors for her organization. She found that those through our training. So it was really interesting to see that as well. So it was really useful for them to have that space. And then the challenges was that we had varied levels of knowledge. So this is always the case. It was kind of hard to try and get everyone up to speed with the same level of knowledge. Language was definitely another issue. That was also, I would say, a barrier that stopped people from joining the training because it was only in English, and that's not always accessible. Applicability in different settings was also an issue, and we tried to cater to that as much as possible, but it's always hard to try and cover nuance of the different settings. And then another challenge that we faced when trying to reach out to potential participants is getting youth groups to understand the importance of pollinators' decline. Because again, it's a very niche topic, so we need to get to do more work on actually communicating how much it can offer as a gateway to so many different environmental issues. So when we try to do something for pollinators, as you all know, it's something that's much more far-reaching than just pollinators. And then, as Nadine mentioned, resources is always a challenge for any young person trying to implement a project. And then this is just a little fun thing, just so I wanted to show you that we did in our training. So we always started with just something to welcome people in the space, and if you have people joining a part of their breakfast that depend on pollinators, just to welcome them and get them thinking about their connection with pollinators more widely than the training. And I feel like this is something very representative of the youth space. So it's not just, you know, content and information and all serious. We always try to make sure that we take care of people's safety in the spaces that we create, and we make sure that everyone feels safe and relaxed and can also have fun and not just do the serious things. So I think it's very representative of youth engagement. And then I'll just do this very quickly, but it's important to note that there's a lot needed from youth to be supported, to be involved in this work. So as Nadine was saying, resources is a huge one, because for a lot of us, this is our work and our careers, and it's really important to make that sustainable. So we got this funding to do this project, but after that, there isn't that much going on for us to continue this. So support in terms of resources is super important, and also support in terms of knowledge exchange. So for people who are not youth, it's really important to try and reach out to youth organizations to offer your expertise and know-how. And also it's important for other groups to make the first step to involve youth, and there's no need to guess. You can always reach out to youth groups and youth organizations and ask them what the best way to do that. And this funding that we got is a great example of that, because JRC reached out to us and said, can you help us engage youth more? And this is what we do. So we could do that for them. So always reach out to organizations and groups, because they would know better how to do that, and they are able to help you out. And so that's all from me. So thank you. Here is a bumblebee to finish it off. So you can find us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and this is the YU website. If you want to connect with us for further work on this, we're always happy to continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venetia. Extremely interesting presentation. Again, I'm happy that you're so young and you're working so hard on this topic. I do believe that what you said about finding resources for escalating what you're doing is extremely important. But from this point of view, I'm very positive, because I do believe that inside the European Parliament, there is a consensus all across the nations and the political parties. So from this point of view, I do have a very positive outlook. And having said that, we'll go to the next speaker, Yuri Matheman of the Naturalis Biodiversity Center. The title of his presentation is Engaging with Citizens Through Learning About Biodiversity. This is extremely important, and I'm a strong believer of this and a strong supporter of this, especially if you want to start even from elementary school to do some formation to the younger people, so that they know what we're talking about. Please, Yuri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to give a presentation in Pollinator Week. And I will share my screen with you, that you can see the presentation. So I have a presentation about engaging with young people through learning about biodiversity. But before I do that, I want to very briefly, well, I will start off with a quote, which is very much forms my way of thinking and working. It's a quote of Nina Simon. She is a museum professional from America. She writes books about inclusion and diversity. And I think this is very important to know. If we really want to have change, be it about pollinators or everybody, we need everybody involved. Also the people that we normally maybe don't meet. If we want to meet them or if we want to involve them, we should do that. If we want to participate, we should do that with them and not about them, not top down. We should really collaborate with them, go to them in their own neighborhoods, etc. So this is a very important quote for me, and I hope this is a little bit of the basis for my presentation. I am head of education of Naturalis Biodiversity Center. We are one of the 5 biggest natural history museums in the world. And since September 2019, we have a completely new institute. So we are a research institute with 120 researchers. We are a collection with 42 million objects. And we are a museum, completely new museum on biodiversity and other related topics. We do a lot of work on pollinators and monitoring of biodiversity. We are very proud that this year we became the European Museum of the Year. Some pictures of our new museum. Then you can at least see which are maybe not related to pollinators, but give you an image and perhaps stimulate you to come to Leiden. We are at Leiden. That's about 30 minutes by train from Amsterdam. One of our top pieces, which really has nothing to do with pollinators, is our own T-Rex. But enough about that. Let's go to pollinators. I want to tell you things. I want to do 2 things. One is I want to tell you about one of our biggest pollinator initiatives. And the second way is our approach to involving young people with biodiversity. So the first thing is why do we do what we do? Well, this is our educational mission. We will discover biodiversity together. Whoever you are, whatever you know, there's always more to be thrilled about, more to learn and more to investigate. I strongly believe, and this is that it's not about knowledge, it's about motivation, and it's about loving nature around you. So why do we do this? We do this, well, it mentioned also by the speakers before me, that nature is very beautiful. In the case of pollinators, it's very important for nature itself, economically, but we know it's in many cases it's under pressure. The wild pollinators are very much under pressure. Also, I think it's very important for our society even that being curious, inquisitive, creative, open to other opinions is very important to our society. It's very important for the development of young people, and it's very, very good to realize that not all children have equal opportunities to be involved in these kind of initiatives. So what did we do? So we started 4 years ago, we started the project in which we together with other partners to stimulate wild bees. And the main activity that we do every year is that we host and we organize the National Bee Count. The National Bee Count is one weekend, or actually one whole week, but one weekend in which individuals can count and schools the week before. And we ask everybody to count and identify the wild bees and the honeybee in their gardens or wherever they are for half an hour. And we have followed that with a big campaign. We get national media. And I think we did it for the 4th time, and every year it grows and grows. It's one of the projects that actually had some advantage by Corona because everybody was at home. And we do it early April or mid-April, that there are not so many pollinator species that it's almost impossible to identify them. So we do, combined with this, we do all kinds of activities around it, all kinds of campaigns around it. So we have information on information sites like Natuurwijzer. We have online lessons and even for schools. And we have really online ways to in which schools and individuals can be connected to pollinators. And very importantly, we are involved, we are co-developers of Ops Identify. Ops Identify is what I want to say, I think is a very important, gives a glimpse of the future on how people can be involved in biodiversity. Some of you will know the other versions of it, like iNaturalist, but this is a app which identifies in the Netherlands, Belgium, and I think Germany, 22,000 species by using artificial intelligence. And the app is being gamified in the sense that you can use it and that you can become better and better. And we are using this more and more in our projects. So in our monitoring projects, in our citizen science projects, we give the technology a bigger role. And it means that people, and especially also young people, are much easier involved, because identifying species, and especially also pollinators, is pretty hard. I mean, even with 8 bumblebees, it's pretty hard to recognize them. But if you can take a picture, and some pollinators are pretty fast, so that's a bit difficult, but a lot of them you can take a picture and it tells you what it is, gives you much more empowerment to be involved in monitoring and even perhaps helping biodiversity. This is the results of the last year of this project. So we have more than 11,000 people who counted bees, more than 200,000 pollinators were counted, and these are the Dutch names. Not surprisingly, of course, the honeybee is the one that's counted most. And then you have, and I always forget the name in English, so look it up. It's the one that stays in the bee hotels, but and the bumblebees are also quite high up there every year. So that's what I very briefly wanted to say about our bee initiative. We do many more biodiversity initiatives, and we try to engage all children, so wherever, from whichever background, and we do that calling the learning ecosystem approach. And I think there are a few notions that are important to realize when you work in nature or you work with pollinators. And one of them is that we tend to put learning in schools, but children are very much outside of school as well. And they get their first impression of what they like, shows research, in many cases outside of the schools. Like about 100%, really 100% of the people working in nature tell that they had a life-changing experience in nature or with nature. So it shows the power of the out-of-school environment. Secondly, children, not all children can get connected to nature because they don't have the possibilities. They don't know it. They live in the cities. They live in areas that are more stone than they are nature. So how do they get involved, especially if they live in neighborhoods or have a cultural or a social background in which they are not getting in touch with normally? And that's interesting because for some, in some areas, this exists. That's why we have a picture of children playing football. Football has an infrastructure in which you can enter in a young age, and you can remain your whole life. And it doesn't matter if you're good or not. As long as you're motivated, you are in this infrastructure. You can play at the streets, you can play at a club, you can play at school, you can become a trainer, you can do after the bar, you can do it only for the fun of it, you can reach great heights and play at Ajax at this moment, one of the best clubs, I think, in Europe at this moment. This doesn't exist for nature, or hardly exists. It exists a little bit for dancing and a little bit for instruments. So how do we do this? And this is the way that we call the learning ecosystem approach. And one of the big notions of this is that children are not as much at school as you would think. They are only, let's say in primary school, 16% of their time awake at schools. So 84% are out of school. And how do you connect children in and out of school with nature? And we do this with the learning ecosystem approach. And the idea is that you create coherence between the out-of-school environment and the inside school environment, and that you support teachers and also the out-of-school environment, so the museums, the allotments, the nature education organizations together, is support them to do this. And we do this by stimulating regional collaborations, really regional and local, and we give children the possibility to follow their own learning paths as long as they're interested. And I have some pictures, because what did we do? Oh, start here. So what we do in several areas in the Netherlands, I think we're now up to 8 or 9 cities in the Netherlands. We start together with schools. We do activities at schools with organizations that do something with nature and children in the area. We do things in the spare time of children, and we organize nature clubs. And this combined, we call Nature Around the Corner. And this means that the children that you see here in the picture, every week, 2 hours per week, they are at nature club. And we do a lot about biodiversity and a lot about pollinators. So they participate in several citizen science projects, for example, the National Bee Count. But they do much more with water. They meet scientists, like this is one of our botanists of Naturalis, who with them tries to recognize flowers, etc., and look at the pollinators that are visiting. You see that this is a very interesting way, and this is of really involving people, and combined with this new technology of artificial intelligence, in which we use to count and identify species, but also we get the qualitative good results. You get people involved, but you also empower them to actually really do something about it. And this is, for example, was a big event somewhere in the summer. It doesn't look like it, but it's the middle of summer. It's the Netherlands, so this is how summer looks like. And we, together with people visiting, we in a week we tried to identify as many species as we could. So with really small children, and every day more and more species entered this list. The first one is cow. It's not really a wild animal, but still, and became more and more and more. And at the end of the 2 or 3 days, it was another week, you saw a lot of different animals, and you see several pollinators in there as well. And some other pictures involving parents. So we tried to involve parents also at all moments. This, unfortunately, was very difficult last year due to Corona, but we really tried to get the parents involved as well, to really do community building in these areas. And I highlighted that we always involve pollinators in this. You see this down there. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any question about learning ecosystems, about our Pollinators initiative, or want to visit our museum, Pietro, for you as well, if you ever want to visit the museum, please feel welcome. Send me a message and I give you a tour of our institute. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yuri. You've touched some very important points. A couple of months ago, I was looking at a video on YouTube in which they ask young children from a city, the city of Milan, how many legs does a chicken have? And he said 4. And they asked him, why do you say 4? Because when I go with my mother to the supermarket, she buys the meat package with 4 chicken legs. So this tells you how much ignorance there is, especially in the young children in the cities, in the big cities.
Yeah. And also, if I can say something about it, one thing that really changed my view on nature, was that for the most people we know, like this kid, but many people, nature doesn't exist. They don't know about nature outside of the cities. I mean, we as people who like this or feel that nature is something out of the cities. So I really believe that we should start in the cities to involve people in nature. And then maybe later they can go out, because you're right. They won't ever see the animals, but they're not going by themselves. Yeah.
Yes, I do agree with that. And, after this presentation, there are some questions from the viewers. And we start with Nadine. And there is a question regarding how can we reconnect youth to nature? Actually, this is a question that could be good also for Yuri, since he talked about this a lot. And the other question, which is more technical for Nadine, is how do you deal with beekeepers arguing that wild pollinators and honeybees are not in competition? So I'll leave you the answer to this.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. I will leave the first question you asked to Yuri because indeed he just gave this really interesting presentation on it, and I will focus on the second question. So how to deal with beekeepers who argue against the competition of pollinators and wild pollinators and honeybees. So I think it really depends on the local situation of the beekeeper in question. So sometimes there is no competition. Imagine a highly managed landscape, for example, a culture of canola. It's very unlikely that there will be many wild pollinators there, unfortunately. And in that case, there may not be that much competition. But of course, there have been also examples of beekeepers placing too many hives in a landscape and essentially overstocking the landscape. And in that case, I would start with offering some information on wild pollinators and then give them also examples of competition and then let them draw their own conclusions and encourage them to check whether their beekeeping practice might be causing problems for wild pollinators. So it's not about blaming beekeepers for what they do, but to find particular actions they can implement in their beekeeping practice, such as checking the hive density, meaning how many hives were put at one place, or to reflect how their connection to farmers look like, how they can use their outreach to also include pollinators in their typical practice as a beekeeper. And maybe Yuri wants to answer the other one. I mean, I can also do it, but I think Yuri would be quite keen on it.
So the question was how to involve.
How do you young people react to this? No, sorry, this is a different question. How can we reconnect to nature? Yes, but no, how can we reconnect to nature?
Yeah.
But I think you already talked about this, but if you want to comment a little more, regarding the city dwellers.
Yeah, I think that interestingly enough, we started talking about it, but I agree I think it's very important but like I said, to note that many people are living in cities, or at least in places that are for a large part concrete and stone, at least it looks like that. And the reconnection, I think, is you have to do it local. I think you should, so you collaborate with schools, with youth organizations together and try to find the children. And like I said in my presentation, I have, it's not that they are good, but I think that campaigns, so temporary actions, are not the answer to the problem. The answer to the problem is creating infrastructure. So creating a way in which children can remain connected if they are connected. So what you see that we do at the different schools is we are there now for 4 years. And in one of the areas, this is an impoverished area in Leiden. And then you see some change. So you see that the club is every year is full. We do activities at the schools. The next step would be also to give them more possibilities to act positively. So also to give them means, for example, to make their own area more pollinator friendly. So these kind of things, I think it's very important to be, well, structurally make it structural, really collaborate for a longer time and focus on city nature to start off.
Yes, and I have another question, which is actually for all of you, but in this case is specifically for Venetia Galanaki. How do young people react to your initiative? What you see when you bring on this type of initiative? What type of reaction do you see, and what would you do better to have a more lasting approach?
I think what Yuri was saying is really important about the long-lasting work that this needs to be carried out as. So for us, this was something that we really saw because people, because it was just a 3-day training. So a lot of people were asking like, what more can I do? Like, how else can I get more informed? They wanted more resources. So I think creating a structure that people can always interact with so they can be involved in this is really important. But in terms of how our participants interacted and reacted to our initiatives, there was a lot of interest from all over the world, actually. And we saw that we got applications from so many different organizations specifically working on pollinators, not just more generally on environmental issues. So I think what we saw is there's a lot of interest from youth groups already. And this is something that we need to make sure that we stop with by offering opportunities to engage. But also in general, with the style of the work that we do that is so interactive, and people found it really useful because we didn't start from the perspective of us knowing the information and then just receiving it, but we had this interactiveness that was something that was really taken well and was really useful for our participants.
Thank you, Venetia. And of course, another topic which is very important that was partially touched by Yuri. Have you noticed a rise in awareness among children's parents? Because obviously, in order to pass this information to the children, of course, also the parents needs to be part of the game. Otherwise, the children do not come to your events and everything else. What do you see here?
Well, it's a very good question, and unfortunately, our main focus in 2020 was going to be the parents, and in 2020 we didn't see any parents. So because of Corona, it was very hard to involve adults in the project. So I'm very happy that we could could continue our work. I mean, we even extended. I mean, we have several naturalistic museums started nature clubs. So for instance, in the city of Tilburg, there are 9 of these clubs. But the parents is one of our main goals for this year to involve. The one thing that we are going to do, which I'm very happy with, is that we're starting a PhD project to see if this approach is really inclusive. So if you really find and how this learning system is inclusive, and if you really involve people and what do they get out of it. So we're really going to research this more in the next few years, but parents is very high on our list to see what happens. But yeah, we had some Corona issues with that.
No, of course, that I agree with you, because we started the program in Italy on a different, but still on biodiversity, but was teaching the young children about the importance of some amphibious species as an indicator of the state of health of rivers or wet areas. But COVID cannot kill the project. Sorry. So, but it is extremely important to get the parents involved in this. We do have other questions from the people that are following this event. Number one, this is for everybody, because do you see or anticipate any obstacles in some EU regions or countries? You know, I do believe that Holland is extremely well positioned in terms of environment, because the sensitivity of the Dutch people regarding environment is very strong, much more than in other countries. But I also do see that, you know, the fight of Venetia in Greece, which sometimes in Greece they are not so sensitive, but the same I can say about Italy. Do you see a problem regarding the different European countries? I don't know if Nadine or Venetia or Yuri wants to answer to this. And then actually, let's answer Venetia or Nadine, and then there is a question for Yuri regarding do you have a network of collaboration between the Naturalis Museum with other museums across Europe? Please, Nadine.
Okay, I can start for sure. Ben has something interesting to add as well. So as I was visiting these 4 countries, Austria, Italy, Slovenia, and Croatia, there were definitely some differences visible, particularly when it comes to funding. So just to say in general, we cannot expect citizens to bear this brunt of conservation work without some extra help. So this includes financial resources like small grants that are truly accessible and geared towards youth. That means not having a co-financing clause. That means providing grants up front and also making application processes very clear and providing assistance along the way. And there is some ESC, so European Solidarity Corps, and Erasmus Plus funding available for such youth groups to access. However, the sizes for the grants are different in every country, and there are also different calculation bases for each country. So for example, Croatia would receive less funding for a youth exchange than Austria would. And I have noticed in my research that some of the people were not so happy with these calculations of how that distribution is being done. So that could be a way to actually redistribute more towards these countries. Ben, what have you found out?
For my project, because we spoke to people from all over Europe, there's definitely a difference. And I can tell you, because I don't work that much in Greece, but I've been involved in the environmental movements here as well. And you can very noticeably see the difference in more affluent countries. Because here, people see the environment as still more of a high-class concern, because we're still a country in crisis. So if this is something that you cannot relate to how it impacts your life, you don't really care about pollinators if there's other things that are more important to you. So I think it's a problem in communication as well for the issue that is very, very prevalent here in Greece. And also, I think the only way to remedy that is what I was saying, that when we try to engage citizens, we need to understand their realities. So here, actually, regardless of partners that work with the hunting association here, it's really hard to communicate with them when I'm someone from a city, educated outside of Greece. So it's really hard to find common ground with people that are so different to you. So it's always important to make sure that you reach out to people that are more relevant in the setting you're trying to influence. So I would say there's definitely a difference in interest in the different countries with relation to the situation of the people that you're trying to reach to. And with regards to youth involvement, we definitely see a difference, because the youth movement is more Western European. So it's again the issue of how do we make those things relevant for people whose concerns and experience with the topic is very, very different. So I would say yes, there's a huge disparity that needs to be addressed by making more relevant locally.
Thank you, Venetia. Sorry, but I have to push because the time is getting short. There is one question, but you cannot answer. But if you want to answer me in writing or on the chat, it's interesting. There is a proposal to have an app on the cellular phone to use a European-based monitoring system from citizens. Think about that. But next, we go to the next presentation so that we do not run too long. And the speaker will be Jean-Sébastien Rousseau with Natagora. And the presentation is Citizen Science and Wild Pollinators in Belgium toward a future monitoring system. And from this point of view, maybe he wants to say something about the possibility of having an app that actually help in the monitoring system. Thank you, Jean-Sébastien, please.
Hello, everybody. You see my presentation on the screen? Okay. So I will explain you what's going on in Belgium about wild bees and other pollinators. And in fact, it's a 4-chapter story. We began with counting butterflies in the gardens, so something similar that has been presented by Naturalis. Then we have a 4 years Interact project called Supple, which changed a lot of things. And then I will also talk you about Identify, the app, which is also used by Naturalis, and its counterpart, which is a portal for nature observation called observation.be or waarneming.nl in the Netherlands. And well, there's been a strong evolution in the technology and artificial intelligence, and it changed a lot of things. And then I will conclude to have a look to our capacity to have a monitoring system for wild pollinators, and in fact, what is still missing. So step 1 was butterfly count in the gardens. We began in 2007. We've been organizing a census of butterflies in Brussels region and Wallonia. Well, it was before the emergence of biodiversity data encoding portals, so it works with a dedicated website, and in fact, it really started with paper forms that participants were sending by post, and those forms were then encoded in database by volunteers. Originally, it was only a weekend in the summer, and since 3 years, it's during the whole month of July. It's very simple, so there is no validation process, and a simple documentation to identify butterflies is given to the participant. So it can only be used to survey common and easy to identify butterflies. Despite the simplicity of the concept, it's very complicated to draw lessons about trends, for example, because there are very strong year-to-year variations in the phenology, so the timing when the butterflies fly, because of course they are not only flying imagos, they are before eggs and then caterpillars and so on. So it's very different from year to year because of different factors as meteorological conditions. The participation is very high thanks to important communication campaigns, but in fact it's not real science. It's difficult to do real science with this because of the restrictions I explained. So for this year, we have about 14,000 participants in almost 3,000 more than 3,000 gardens. So it's interesting to aware people about nature and to explain things about pollinators and what you can do in your garden to protect them, but it's not a real monitoring system. Then we have the Supple Interact project from April 2016 to March 2020. So it was an important cross-border project with a part of Wallonia, a part of Flanders, and a part of northern France. And it was mainly targeted on wild bees, and it gave very interesting results. The main progress has been made through intensive training of professional but also amateur observers, and the share of knowledge between the partners and also between specialists like University of Mons and generalists like Natagora or Natuurpunt or Flanders. So thanks to this project, we have created working groups, and well, it was very interesting, because we had we have a real update of the knowledge on wild beasts. For example, in 2020, more than 100,000 observation came in our database. If you compare with just before the project, it was only 20,000. We also estimated that more than 3,000 new observers became interested in wild pollinators thanks to the project. And also the percentage of validated data raised from 30 to almost 40%. So it's very important to be able to talk about wild pollinators, but also to progress in the way to collect valuable data. So then we had intensive field prospection, and we discovered that a lot of things are still not well known or even unknown. Just for example, with this project, each year from the beginning of the project, new wild bee species for Belgium has been discovered each year. This also highlighted strong year-to-year variation in the timing, so phenology and abundance of wild bees, more than what we can see with butterflies. And it's very important to know that if we want to design a monitoring scheme for wild pollinators, which could result to estimate trends. For example, here, this is a specialist bee species, which is called Andrena rosae. It's specialized on umbelliferous, and you can see from the statistics that it's very different from year to year. There were huge numbers in a lot of areas in last year, and it's completely different in 2019 and this year. And it's not because there are less observers. No, it's, well, we don't really understand why, but it's very different from year to year. Interestingly, we also try other methods to collect valuable data on wild bees. So we decided to kill less and less bees. So you know that entomologists often need to capture, collect, kill insects because they need to be looked under a microscope to identify them. So with the technology and new photo cameras, which are now able to take very close pictures, we at least in the French-speaking part of the country, we don't kill any more bee to identify it. Another example is this bumblebee, which in fact was considered extinct or almost extinct, with only 5 observations in the 80s. And with the Supple project, well, there was nothing in the database before. And then you can see that this species is still present in the southern part of the country. So also to illustrate that, well, there are large gaps in the knowledge of wild bees species, communities, distributions, and so on. Then step 3 is observation.be and identify. So observation.be is in fact our national web portal to collect data about nature, and it has been widely used during the project, the Supple project. So people encoded what they observed in this database. And more recently, it has been boosted by Ops Identify, so an app that has already been presented to you by Naturalis, and also the COVID lockdown, because more people were watching nature in the area because they cannot move, they can't go abroad and so on. So you can see on this graph that well, there is a break, a strong break in 2020, which has been a bit maintained in 2021. Here is the...
Sorry, Jean-Sébastien, you have to go faster because otherwise there is no space for the other speaker. So try to close. Sorry,
okay.
But unluckily time is our dictator. So
okay. Then the app, which used artificial intelligence, already presented to you, very simple to use. You take picture, there is artificial intelligence which tell you with a degree of certainty which species it is, and if you save, it goes directly in the database and can be validated. Well, all these Supple and also lockdown and Ops Identify raised the number of observation of wild bees during the last years. The problem is that now how to treat such a quantity of data, because we need, if we want to have a monitoring system, we need to have validated data. And well, during the Supple project, people were paid to do it, but since then, well, it's very difficult to maintain or to accelerate this collection of good data, because unfortunately it's very difficult to find money at a European level to work with wild bees. You know, there is no Natura 2000 species in wild bees, and unfortunately Belgium is small and we do not have species with endangered status on the European red list. So to be able to have a monitoring scheme, we need to go on and try to strengthen the knowledge of existing observers, increase the number of new observers, be able to validate a large amount of data, and put all these things together to try to have a system to really monitor numbers and to have trends and to see if conservation works or not. And of course, we need to find money to do it. Okay, thank you very much. Listen to me, and if you have any question, I'll try to answer.
thank you, Jean-Sébastien. You pointed out a very important point, which is that the pollinators are not in the list of endangered species, so that makes it more difficult to get money to do studies. We'll try to find a political solution for that. Okay, so we'll see what we can do on that. Now we go very fast, and sorry, but again, you know, time is a dictator, to the presentation of Elena Abassi of UNAPI, so the Association of the Beekeepers in Italy. She has quite a curriculum regarding environment and beekeeping, so I will leave the floor to Eleonora. Thank you, Eleonora, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I try to share my screen. 1 second. Can you see that? Okay.
Yes, we can see, but
okay.
Not the presentation.
Thank you.
You should start the presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Elena Abassi. I'm a technician in Aspromiele, a regional beekeeper association in Piedmont, a region in the northern part of Italy. Aspromiele started to work with beehive as a bioindicator several years ago. As we know, bees are a good organism to do that because they transport in the hive the substance that they found in the environment, and the technician, when make a sample in the colonies, as a good representative of the substance that are spread in the environment surrounding the colonies. Aspromiele started to think about a specific project in biomonitoring since 2017 to give an answer to the beekeepers that each year reported several problems in the health of colonies. This year, we monitored 41 points in different environments, and several professions were involved on it, such as beekeepers, technicians, and institutions. The project has several steps. The first one is the field work, when technicians make the survey and the sample in the beehive and send the samples at the laboratory analysis. When we receive the report, we make some data processing, and then we put a big effort to share the results. We speak about this project at different level with, for instance, beekeepers, citizens, and also the institutions. In 5 years, we detected many contaminants, and also we could find often them in cocktails. So we analyze a lot of samples that inside contain more than one active substance. Just to give an idea, I let a little table of one monitoring point. You can see here the metrics analyzed that are nest honey and bee bread, and you can see that often bee bread contain more active substance than nest honey. The contaminants could be divided in fungicide, insecticide, and herbicide, and if we consider the whole of our analysis, we can say that the half of active substance we found could be fungicide, the 30% were insecticide, and the 13% were herbicide. To better understand the data we collect in this year and to better communicate the results, we are making a big analysis of the huge amount of data we collected. This analysis is still ongoing, but anyway, some publications are already online, and you can find it on our website, lapisonline.it. About the results, I just want to share with you some highlights about glyphosate. Glyphosate is a total herbicide that is widely used in all the world. We found it in a lot of our samples, and in some cases we found it a really high concentration. In this case, we thought that probably bees collected nectar or pollen directly from flowers that have a drift of the treatment. But also we have to say that in a lot of samples we found glyphosate at lower concentration. Something that we didn't expect, it was to find glyphosate almost in the whole biomonitoring point. We find it also in the control colonies, far away from intensive agriculture and in habitat centers. After knowing that, we decided to analyze the samples to know which kind of pollen they contain. We discovered that most of samples contain pollen from wild species. And after knowing that, we started to think about that probably the problem is not only the drip treatments from the farm, but also we are surrounded all of background pollution. This is a problem because today we know, thanks to many scientific research, that glyphosate can cause problems to the health of pollinators and plants. Thanks to the symbiosis with pollinators, beekeepers could photograph the soil and plant situations. We know that plants, soil, microorganisms, and pollinators are all connected, and they are living in a balance in the environment. We know now that molecules could enter in this balance and could cause some interference, but at the moment we can't scale how big are these interference. The biomonitoring started to give an answer at beekeepers that each year report some problems in the health of the colonies. We found some answer. We found a lot of molecules in the sample. Now, probably we could say that the project will continue because in addition to that, beekeepers report year by year a lack of harvest of their colonies. That means that bees couldn't find enough nectar and pollen in the environment that is surrounding their colonies. So this could be read as a signal of critical health of plants. So the beekeepers are detecting problems, big problems in the ecosystem balance. To try to answer to these questions, we have a biomonitoring that is a proven system able to investigate what is happening at environmental level. For the future, we want to improve this project, adding new measures of new variables in order to go deep in the investigation. News about this project will be published on our website, that is lapisonline.com. I thank you all for your attention. I give you my contacts, my email, if there will be some question that you want to write me. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleonora. Yeah. Extremely interesting presentation. You touched some very controversial topics, which are pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. And this is one of the key topics, in my opinion, if we want to really save the pollinators, because we need to have a coordinated effort with the agricultural people to make them understand that on one side, and they do understand that, the pollinators are very important for their business because pollinators can increase their output of their fields. But on the other side, they cannot refuse any type of modification on the type of chemicals that they use in their production. So this is a very strong topic, but it's not part of this specific event. So we'll move to the next speaker, which is Sue Collins, of the butterfly conservation Europe. This is very important because in the mind of most of the European citizens, the pollinators are only the honeybees, but we know very well that there are other pollinators, even birds, not just insects. So, but I will leave the floor to Sue Collins for her presentation. Please, Sue.
Hi there, thank you very much.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen if I can. No, it's not working. So
I can, no worries.
maybe, yeah, no, perhaps you can share it. Thank you very much. Lovely.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, everybody see that? Yeah. Thank you. Well, first of all, my presentation today is a result of the ABLE parliamentary pilot project on assessing butterflies in Europe, for which we're very grateful to the European Parliament for support. So I'm going to talk about butterflies as indicators, and these indicators are underpinned by citizen science monitoring. Next slide. So the key messages that I have that chime with many of the other messages today is that butterflies are good indicators of environmental health, that citizens can play a key role in collecting data, and that the ABLE project has extended citizen science butterfly monitoring schemes to 21 EU member states now. And we have plans and projects going in the Spring project, which is a parliamentary preparatory action to extend to all EU member states by the end of 2023. I want to indicate that the use of indicator data is vital for policy evaluation and design, and the data underlines that pollination services are seriously at risk across Europe. Next slide. So, as we all know, the current decline of insects and insect biomass is very severe, and insects have traditionally been overlooked but are fundamental components of the ecosystem, and the causes of decline relate particularly to agriculture, intensive agriculture, abandonment. They're also influenced significantly by climate change. And this is a global problem, and the UN Foresight report from 2020 shows that there is an insectageddon and a call for more robust data and rigorous analysis, and we're playing our part in achieving that. So next slide. So in the ABLE project, we created indicators from the results of monitoring, and we have a database that's run by CEH in the UK, and that's a world leader in collecting standardized data based on standardized methodology, systematic recording and validation. So it addresses many of the scientific questions. It is good quality data, and it underpins well-researched and designed indicators. The quality of the indicator is improved as the number of observations increases and the spread of observations across the EU to Eastern and Central Europe and the Mediterranean countries in particular increases. So the ABLE project has enabled us to extend the representativeness of the data underpinning the indicator. There are still data gaps that need to be filled, including rare and threatened species, which only occur in hotspots of biodiversity. We did in the urban project, in the ABLE project, develop 5 indicators. We updated the grassland butterfly indicator, which has been a SEBI 2010 indicator since 2010, and that shows for the EU 27 a 25% decline in butterfly abundance since 1990. There's a little bit of better news for the woodland indicator. There was a series of declines in the 1990s and some recovery since. The results for Natura 2000 areas show that the results are similar inside and outside sites, which actually testifies to the fact that it's agricultural management, both inside and outside sites, that is really crucial to the fate of pollinators. The urban indicator shows that widespread butterfly species are fairly stable, and with climate change, the trend is not clear with current data. So next slide. So here's a little bit more about the grassland butterfly indicator. Here are 4 of the butterflies out of the 17 that are the subset of butterflies that underpin the grassland butterfly data. And here is the spread of data across the years from 1990 onwards. Next slide, please. The woodland butterfly indicator is based on 67 species, and here are 6 of them. And that, as I said, shows some declines in the 1990s and some recovery since. And that may be partly due to climate effects. Further research is required on that. Next slide, please. So what did we do in ABLE, and what were the lessons we learned? Well, the existing European butterfly monitoring schemes have been running in the UK since the 1970s, and in several other countries since the 1990s. And so there was a lot of experience of how to do standardized transect monitoring and involve volunteers. What we learned in ABLE was the importance very much of recognizing cultural differences that were referred to by some of our other speakers, and the tradition of nature conservation and observation in Western Europe is well developed, and the affluence allows people the time and luxury of going out and counting butterflies in the countryside. And we need to recognize that that's not so easy to recruit volunteers all across Europe. But the crucial thing for a standardized monitoring scheme is to find coordinators in each country, and sometimes in each region. We now have 3 coordinators in Italy, for instance, because it covers 5 biographic zones. It's very large, and it has 220 butterflies. So you need to understand what you're likely to see in the different regions of Italy. We help our coordinators set up their scheme in the way they want. So in Austria, we've got a Western Austria scheme and an Eastern Austria scheme, but all the data comes together in one place. It's important to involve everyone from lepidopterist, expert scientists to amateurs, young people, older people, volunteers of all sorts. We train and support the volunteers, and it's really important to feed back to them the results and show them that their data is used. And that's why indicators and the discussions we have with the European Union about the use of the indicators and their implications for policy reform are really important. Next slide, please. So this map shows you in purple, the stable BMS schemes, which have been running for a long time. And then in orange or yellow, you've got the BMS schemes that were created under the ABLE project. And the grey ones, these are all EU 27 countries. Well, no, it's 28 actually, isn't it? The grey ones are the schemes that are needed still across the European Union. So we are targeting our efforts at Greece, Romania, Slovakia, Latvia, and Lithuania. which we need to recruit more, and Denmark, where we need to recruit more volunteers and identify coordinators, which we are doing in the Spring project. So in ABLE, we added 10 countries to the scheme: Italy, Portugal, Hungary, Cyprus, Austria, Czech Republic, Croatia, Malta, Bulgaria, and Poland. And we need to grow the volunteers there and to increase the number of transects walked. Next slide, please. So how did we do this? Well, here are some pictures from the 22 workshops and training seminars we ran for 600 people. Some of them we ran face-to-face in 2019. Unfortunately, in 2020, due to COVID, we had to move online, but we've made the best use of that, and online training can also be effective, but we're looking forward to getting out in the field again and teaching people how to identify butterflies on the wing. Next slide, please. So here are some more pictures, and as you see, the later ones are the workshops we ran online with people in Malta, Poland, and other places. Next slide, please. So other resources that we produced to help volunteers were we translated our methodology, our monitoring methodology for counting butterfly abundance in the field. We translated that into 14 languages that are on the website. And we also developed the Butterfly Count app, which is on iPhone and Android. And there are 19 languages there. And there are subsets of the species that you would expect to find in the different countries. We also produced these PDF online identification guides for regional areas in native languages, and we plan by the end of 2023 to have covered all the EU 27. So those are easily usable ID guides that show what butterflies you would expect to see in your area, and they have little arrows which show what you particularly look for when you're trying to identify things, and those will be available online. Next one. So looking at the Butterfly Count app, if you go to your iPhone and you Google Butterfly Count app, you'll find a little mauve symbol. It's free, it's in multiple languages, the species are filtered for each country, and we're particularly encouraging people to use it to do 15-minute counts. So you go into the field, your garden, the park, an agricultural area, anywhere, and it automatically records by GPS where you are, and it either tracks an area or a route you walk. And you can just identify the butterflies you see, and you count them, how many of each species you see, and you just click on them in the app, and it records for 15 minutes, and then the data can be uploaded to the BMS website, and it then goes into the calculations that we use for the indicator, and if it's a grassland habitat. And this is a really good innovation, this app, and it can be used in a complementary way to the transect monitoring. The transect monitoring is more defined. There's a defined area, a defined route that transect walkers walk. But this is a volunteer-led process, and we train the volunteers to recognize the butterflies. The next one. So, as I said, volunteers who go out and count the butterflies have the satisfaction of knowing that they're not just counting and this data is going on the shelf somewhere. This data is going into a European database, and we are calculating indicators that are used by the European Union to assess and evaluate policies like the agriculture policy and the biodiversity policy. And increasingly, as we get more data and it's more representative, this uptake of the indicators will be more acceptable. And they can be used, this data can be used in prioritized action frameworks that are set up by member states to determine funding for their Natura 2000 areas. It can be used to shape CAP strategic plans in the next CAP series of funding in the next 7 years. It can be used in forestry, urban and regional plans, and it can make an input to Article 17, assessments of conservation status of listed butterflies. The results of the work highlight the importance of reducing the adverse effects of intensification, that includes pesticide and overgrazing, the importance of reversing abandonment of semi-natural grasslands, the importance of restoring abandoned meadows, and the need to set a pollinator recovery target in the forthcoming EU binding legislation on ecosystem recovery. And the key sort of scientific things are to increase butterfly larval plant resources, not just nectar for butterflies, but the breeding and feeding needs for the butterflies, which often lay their eggs on specific plants, and some of them overwinter, so they're affected by the rate of the cutting regime. We need to create more open habitats and edges in forests and woods and encourage butterfly-friendly urban green spaces. And all these advices are underpinned by the data collected by citizens, and we would like to cooperate much more both with young people, as we've heard today. There are very good initiatives here, and they can become volunteers, and they can help us with by using the Butterfly Count app and by also training to be transect walkers and to contribute to the European indicator process. And for the future, we have the Spring project, where we are extending, as I said, butterfly monitoring schemes to all EU member states. And we are also starting the monitoring of moths, which actually are very interesting to young people. My grandchildren are really interested in moths, and I think they're very accessible. They're often, you can look at them in urban gardens. They're a cheap means of trapping them and then letting them go. There's no killing involved in either butterfly monitoring generally or in moth monitoring. Only a few species have to be looked at in the lab to identify them. So we're very optimistic about the future, and one of the things I would say is collaboration and growing the network, both through citizen social media and through online training and through face-to-face activities in the field. So last slide, please. I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank the EU and the MEPs for funding and support, for the whole ABLE team who are listed on the right, and to all our volunteers who walk thousands of kilometers a year and support and input their data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. You raised a topic which is not very well known, because everybody thinks about pollinators only about honeybees, but nobody thinks about butterflies. So it is very important to raise awareness on this. Unluckily, we are running very short on time. There are some questions to the speakers, but I will read the questions, but you need to answer on the chat, and then we'll count for your answer and we'll put it in the document. But specifically for Sue, we have some question. How do you make sure that they're not counting the same individual during these 15 minutes talks? And also, what is your opinion regarding what is the weight of climate change on the different trends on the different species regarding butterflies? Or in other words, how is there a study, a scientific study that actually puts some weight to the different causes of these negative trends, like pollution, urbanization, pesticides, forestation, and so on? And regarding a question for Eleonora, how did you find the funds to do the monitoring? and how do you intend to continue for the future, and what are your plans for the future? Now, there are probably coming more questions, but again, we need to absolutely to close everything by 4 o'clock. So I will do a closing statement. I do want to thank all the speakers because I've learned a lot, even though this is a topic that I'm extremely interested in. I studied a lot in the last couple of years, but I did learn a lot. It is a very difficult topic because, number one, there is a topic of teaching the children, and especially, and this should be a political action, in my opinion, to make sure that there are standard training sessions, even at elementary school level, especially for the children that live in the city, so that they understand the importance of butterfly, of honeybees, of pollinators in general. But also there is another important topic, which is in a way related to the scope of this panel, which is the science and the monitoring of the species. And, you know, unluckily, we need to be very realistic. And one of the problems is an economic problem. So we need to talk, and these are topics that have been raised during this event. We need to talk about illegal importation or importation of honey or byproducts or other products of honey inside the EU without any certificate of origin. And this is important because, in my opinion, we need to make sure that the economic resources of Europe goes to the European beekeepers so that they can continue with their incredible work that they are doing. Also, another topic which is very important, and I'm really touching some really difficult topics, but I think is important, is, again, like I mentioned before, the relationship with the agricultural field. Because, of course, you know, we know very well that, for example, neonicotinoids, pesticides are really bad and chronic in several different pollinators. Now, in my opinion, the politics should say, okay, the neonicotinoids has been scientifically registered as dangerous for this. We need to be pragmatic and say, okay, you have 2 years. Here are the funds to do research and development to find an alternative, but after 2 years, there's no other option. There's no lobby going to the member state and asking for a prolongation of the use of pesticides and so on. It needs to stop, period. And so from this point of view, it's extremely important. I do believe that the agricultural crowd is starting to understand that it is very important to save the pollinators, because it is, again, also an economic indicator, because if the pollinators are in a good state, also the output of their production is higher. So they need to give something and help us also in the monitoring and the scientific studies on the pollinators, because it's part of their income. So again, very, very complex topic, but like I said before, luckily the entire European Parliament is very, very aware of this topic. There is a consensus all across the nations and the political parties. So this makes me think that we will be able to do very positive actions to do the right things for the pollinators all across, starting from the honeybee, of course, but it's the main topic, but also going to the butterflies, to the birds, to all the other bumblebees, and so on and so on and so on. So from this point of view, again, I do have a very positive outlook for the situation. Again, I want to conclude thanking all the speakers. I really also want to stress that I'm very happy that there were some very young speakers that are really working very hard to protect, inform, and train the European citizens on this extremely important topic that, in my opinion, should be the top priority in Europe regarding the biodiversity and saving the nature. So having said that, I do believe that we are closing this panel. I don't know if the organization wants to make a final comment, but I'm here, I'm available. Do write me, whatever I can do to help your efforts in your respective countries all across Europe, I'm available. So go strong. Let's save the pollinators. Okay. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you.
Sorry, I would just like to say for the questions that could not be answered, there will be a report after the week. So we will try to have all these questions answered in this report. Thank you very much for your participation.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye,
Bye.
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 Bye.